Okay, so week 7 of the digital marketing course, we're going to be talking about websites. We'll focus on the role of content, the role of websites in digital marketing, and we'll talk about a bit about how you can actually, the website development process, the design process, the planning process. We'll talk about development tools, and as I mentioned, we'll talk heavily about how we can make a website more effective. So the role of the websites in digital marketing strategy is obviously, it's frankly crucial, particularly when we talk about digital marketing. You've got to imagine that the website's sitting at the heart of everything that we're doing, and in the last few weeks we've been talking about, search marketing, search engine optimization, social media advertising, social media marketing, all of these activities that we perform on other platforms. In the main, they're about reaching a target audience on those platforms. And in the main, most of the tactics we're employing are about bringing a subset of that audience onto our website, onto our owned platform. So clearly, it's absolutely crucial. So before we dive into the main stuff, I thought let's just get the techie stuff out of the way. So most websites, the majority of websites out there these days will have will sort of be built on what's called a 3-tiered architecture. And what it means is you've got a presentation, a front-end layer. So when we go and actually look at a website and we're looking at it on the screen and we see some nice pictures and nice words, that's the presentation layer that sits along the top. Let me pull up a website. Let's pull up MintTwist. So if you right click on a website and you view the page source, most of you probably have sort of seen this stuff. All of this is HTML. This is and this is the front end layer of the code. And what browsers do, whether it's Chrome or Internet Explorer or whatever, they turn compliant HTML into what we see. So this is what we see as humans, because the browser's turning this HTML code into what we see. So that's the front end layer of a website. But most websites will have a collection of data that's stored inside a database. And so when we log in, for example, to Facebook, and when we log into Facebook, we're presented with a feed of all of our friends and all of our photos, all of our friends' photos. It's collecting all of that information from a database. So obviously, it wouldn't be a very good idea for Facebook to serve up all of that database information and send it to our computers, because then hackers would just have a complete field day. So the reason why you've got this 3-tiered architecture, one of the reasons why, is that the database layer, which is at the bottom here, sits inside a server that is not, and that data is not sent to the presentation. It's not sent to the website visitor's computer like the presentation layer code is sent. And so the data that sits inside a database needs to be accessed by a programming language that might be Java, it might be .NET, it might be C#, and there are many others. But those types of programming languages, I guess in the industry, you would call this software development, and this database development, and this might be sometimes front-end development. There are different types of developers out there, and some of them will have transferable skills. But typically, and this is the case inside MintTwist, we've got some developers that specialize in the front-end code and making things look really great, but also work seamlessly. And then we've got developers that are very strong at creating functional application layer code, and typically those developers will also have strong database skills as well. So look, why have I sort of gone into the detail here? I suppose the key thing from the perspective of the people out there is that there is a world of difference between a brochure-based website that's really focusing on the front end and presenting information really clearly, and actually there might not be much going on the database perspective because it's not a very functional website. That website is a relatively simple website, and therefore the cost to develop it might be less than £15,000. But if you're talking about a very, very functional website, then it might look the same on the front end as a simpler website, but it might cost £100,000 or £1 million. Depending on how much integration work goes on underneath will determine the cost for a very sort of functional website. And similarly, to support a very functional website, the skills and the amount of time that you need to make changes to it might be considerably more than a simple website. So as always, if there are any questions, put them in the chat. Because I'm presenting today, hopefully one of my MintTwist colleagues will answer them, I'm more than happy for someone to turn on their mic and ask a question as we go as well. Okay, let's continue. Okay, so let's talk about different types of website pages then. So we introduced this concept of Hero, Hub, and Hygiene, and you don't need to go over the detail. Let's talk about how it works in the context of types of web pages. So we would look at a website, and this is a car hire company, and if you see a page like this, which is in this case it's the make an inquiry for a car hire page, or if you see a product page or a service page, we would, inside MintTwist in the industry, I guess, we refer to that as hygiene content. And so the thing about this type of page is that it's all about making the user do that one specific thing, which in the case of this example is, fill out a collection destination where I want to collect my hire car, where I want to drop it off, and the dates that I want to do that, and then press the search button. So all of this, the architecture of this page and the design and the layout of this page is orientated around making the user take that particular action. We don't really want to divert the user away from a page like this because it's kind of like the money page on the website. It's at the bottom of the funnel of the website, if you like. And so the way that you would evaluate a page like this would be very much around how many people get to the page, and of those people who did get to the page, what percentage of them actually take the primary action that we want them to take. So it's the conversion rate of that page. Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a few moments. How well is it scoring? So you would measure the conversion rate, and that would be a measure of how effective that page is. And what you're really trying to do is, if 5% or 10% of people take that action, great, that's our benchmark. But then how can we improve it? And one example on a page like this is, these are the messages that reinforce why Hertz would be a good place to rent your car from. And this is an example of helping the user to be more confident about taking that next step. In e-commerce websites, you'll often see all of the security type symbols that make people safer about sharing their payment details and things like that. Okay. From an SEO perspective, the hygiene pages are really where we want our money phrases optimized for. So the MintTwist, we've got a web design page and we've got an SEO page. The SEO page is really where we want all of the SEO, keyword research, backlinks. We want them all pointing to the SEO page. So hygiene pages will typically have your kind of money key phrases. And if we're talking about search engine optimization pages project, those pages would be the ones where we want to send the search traffic, and where we want to point the SEO strength for that, the phrase that's related to that particular hygiene page. Okay, and when we talk about hub content, classically it's blog content type stuff. And the thing about blog content is this is the stuff that we're probably using to try and capture awareness, and to capture potentially new or potentially existing audiences, but we're capturing them in a way where we're capturing their interest based on something that's related to our product and service, as opposed to our actual product and service. And this is obviously, really where a large overlap happens between PR and digital marketing, because in the world of PR, we're creating lots of awareness type content that can be interesting to wide audiences that are still relevant to our clients. And this type of content is brilliant because typically it's more interesting to a wider audience. And you can tell me much more than I can tell you about this stuff. But from a digital marketing perspective, it's also an opportunity for us to link from this type of content to the relevant hygiene page. So this point at the bottom here is kind of the key one. If we're going to create content like this, and if it's successful content, then in order to maximize its value from a marketing perspective, we want to make sure it's appropriately linked to the right hygiene pages, so that if some of the audience that does come in and engage that content, if they do so happen to be interested in getting a car hire quote, it's kind of easy for them to make that next step. So that's the way that we engage a real world person. But also, and as we were talking about in week 2, when we spoke about search engine optimization, this type of content is really the opportunity for us to increase our footprint from an SEO perspective. So if we have this type of content, and if we can load in, car hire London, and if obviously it needs to be relevant, but if we can load in a phrase like that and use the anchor text on a blog page that's getting traffic from external sources and backlink it to our hygiene page, then we increase the strength of our hygiene page from an SEO perspective for the phrase car hire London, or whatever. And so hygiene content, and plays 2 really important roles in digital marketing. And lots of PRs probably don't even know how much power they have with the content they create. It engages people in the real world on external platforms to bring them in to the website. Great, more traffic on the website, brilliant. But it also has potentially correctly marked up, and we'll talk about that today, correctly marked up from an SEO perspective, has a significant opportunity to positively impact the SEO value of the whole site, and obviously individual phrases based on the context of any particular piece of content. Okay. And then, and we've got hero content, and in this example, Hertz have created, an ultimate road trip, like guide to the USA, possibly targeting, foreign tourists from outside of the USA who are going in and who want to hire a car and have that all-American experience. And this sort of content is big and loud, and it's PR type stuff. And again, we just want to make sure that from a digital marketing perspective, that it's correctly marked up and then correctly linked to either hygiene content or hub content, so that those audience members that do happen to be interested in taking the next step, and obviously it will be a subset, but for those people who are interested, we want to make it as easy as possible for them to make the next step. Okay. Okay. All right. Next. Okay, so I thought I'd put in here a bit on landing pages because they're really important. So the last couple of weeks we've been talking about social media advertising, we've talked about Google advertising and Google AdWords. Pretty much all of the advertising that best practice, and certainly what MintTwist do, would be to any advertising campaign, we want to ideally send users to a dedicated landing page as opposed to the home page or even a generic hygiene page. And the reason for that is if you're taking the opportunity to go and target a very specific audience in a very specific way with a specific message, then you would significantly increase the chances of that being ultimately a successful engagement. First of all, if they click on the advert, that's successful anyway, because that's not an easy thing to get people to do, at least in large numbers. But those people that do click on adverts, once they do get to our website, once we've done that amazing work to get them there, we want to give ourselves the best chance of them being able to take the next step in the process. And this is what landing pages really do so well, because we can relate them so specifically to the nature of the advert that brought them there in the first place. We can cut out all of the fluff and just focus on the action. And so this landing page here, the do it now, this is the thing we actually want them to do. Their headline relates to the message that, I'm talking about an ad, but there are other ways, but let's talk about an ad because it's the best example. Whatever the message in the ad was, the headline's going to reflect it. Whatever the imagery in the ad was, the image here is going to reflect it. A secondary headline gives a bit more detail, some key bullet points, and then we would just want them to click. The testimonial is there just to support the user, to give them a bit more confidence, and so this is a kind of a famous infographic called The Anatomy of a Perfect Landing Page, and it's quite a good one. Okay, right. Talk now a bit about the website planning process. So for those of you out there who have clients that are asking you, I want to build a new website, or I want to refresh a new website, and obviously, we've had thousands of these conversations, and they're brilliant conversations. But we find that the best way to sort of guide a user, to help them to make the right decisions, but also to start build the foundations, the building blocks of us being able to work with them together to create a successful website. There are some sort of steps in the process that you need to guide a user through in order to be able to create like a really sensible and meaningful brief. So many times clients will create their own brief, and that's absolutely fantastic. It's brilliant they've started that. But sometimes there will be holes in those briefs. And so we'll sort of talk you through now the sort of the main things that we would say, help a web design and development company to create a really effective website. So obviously the four obvious ones are, and you could just say this off the bat to clients, is what do we want to say? What's the key message? What's the objective of the website? Who's the audience? And then there is this thing about how we want them to feel during that interaction. And obviously that's where design, really comes to the fore. But then it's also, what do we actually want them to do? So if it's an e-commerce website, it's buy something, it's create a customer account. But if it's not one of those things, what is the sales process? If it's a marketing website that underpins the website. So how do we want clients to inquire? Are there any tactics that you're employing that we want to connect with the website functionality? Okay, so we sort of talk about a 4-step planning process: define the message and the audience, define the perception, define the actions, the key goals, if you like, the goals from us as a website owner and brand, what we want our audiences to do on our websites. And then all of that really drives the content as opposed to the other way around, or ideally. Okay. So these are the specific questions. What's the primary message? What's the major purpose of the website? Are there any specific short-term and long-term goals for the website? If there are, we need to know about them so we can build them in. Target audience. The primary competitors, like with lots of things in marketing, having a look at what the competitors are doing, is really useful in many ways, because we might be able to steal some ideas. But what we really want to do, and certainly this has always been, it's direction of travel for MintTwist, is that if we build a website for any client, we want to build them the best website in their particular industry niche. So we will look at the competitors, benchmark what they're doing, and what we suggest to our clients will be a project that will put them ahead of all of their competitors. If you're going to redesign your website, why not? And then obviously understanding the thing about USPs is, like, everyone throws it around, but on a website, it's absolutely fundamental, particularly if our clients are in competitive industry sectors, because and we sort of touched on this, I think, in week 1, but as clients are going down the funnel in modern customer journeys, a lot of the qualification that prospective customers are doing is there's no interaction with the brand or with us as the marketers, the marketing team, or the sales team. That value judgment is being played out online, and in many cases, if a prospective client has shortlisted us or our clients, then they have shortlisted them in their own minds. They haven't notified those brands that they've been shortlisted, and they're making value judgments based on the relative contents of their websites. And so the reason why USPs are so important is, if you really do have, or if our clients really do have, a genuine unique selling point, and if we can present that very, very clearly on our websites, and if we can do it in a way so that we get that message across to our ideal clients, and if it's our ideal client, they're going to resonate with that unique selling point. And so it can't really be stressed enough that the unique selling point needs to really come out in the content, in the design, in the functionality of a website, because ultimately that will make it more effective. Okay, and perception, how are you currently perceived? If it's a brand repositioning exercise is going on, how do you want to be perceived if you want to change your positioning? We often ask, as well as competitors, we often ask clients for a list of websites that they just like. As much as the MintTwist mantra is, your website is for your Mr. or Mrs. client, your website is for your client, it's not for you. We will say that to our clients. The truth is, at the end of the day, there's normally someone, and it's very often the person who's signing the checks, who, if they don't like what they see, they're just not going to be happy. So obviously, it's a trade-off. And so we want to know what sort of websites, the project sponsors like, and it doesn't need to be in their industry. Okay. And then, so step 3 is defining the actions that we want visitors to take. And I suppose the key here is the primary action. If we're talking about, let's say, a lead generation website for a software company, the primary action might be to sign up for a demonstration or a consultation or something like that. Now, if that is the primary action, that's not a primary action that you would take from the homepage, or possibly not directly from the homepage, but you would want the homepage to signal that for the audience members that are ready to take that next step, that is where they need to go. And we would have a dedicated page that's set up to tell people the benefits of signing up for a demonstration or consultation, and obviously introduce the form functionality as quickly and easily and as seamlessly as possible. And so the primary action from the home page might not necessarily be the primary action that you would want them to take before leaving, because in most cases there's going to be a number of different audience types, and they're going to have a number of different objectives. And the home page, in a really simplistic sense, is almost like, you know, if you're walking into a department store or, you know, Harrods or something like that, and you've got a little map that tells you this, where the toy section is, this is women's fashion, this is men's fashion, here's, you know, the food court. And that the homepage is kind of designed to send the different audience members off in the right direction. Now, if Harrods just so happens to make 90% of its profits from the food court, and that's the most important set of audience, then obviously it's going to design its website homepage in a way where it puts more prominence on the most important audience or action that it's trying to push. Okay, and then there are some elements that you might want to have on every page, and a good example of that is contact information, particularly if it's a site that's looking to invite people to contact and make inquiries. Then, you know, having contact information universally available is a very good idea. You know, and then we've got this whole, you know, content thing, and I think there are 2 or 3 groups inside Fin where there's conversations going on with MintTwist teams, and we're having conversations about content audits. So very often when MintTwist start a website project, a content audit will be, you know, a really major component of that project. Yeah, and that's at one end. But also what we're doing with, and we're doing this with a couple of you just now, is talking about running mini audits for mini clients that are potentially going to look at doing something with their website and or SEO. Okay, still people in the meeting room. Okay, and so we can, so defining our website content, it's kind of like, you know, what you need to know everything else before you define the ideal type of content that's actually needed. And obviously on week 2, we spoke about SEO, and there might be a lot of content we need to support an SEO project as well. So the idea is that you capture the information, you capture the strategy, you capture the objectives, the goal, the audience, the message, how it's going to connect with your sales strategy. We capture all of that information so we know what, so then we can articulate what sort of the right content would look like. If there's an SEO project that's going alongside of it, we would have done the keyword research and looked at the competitors and found all of the opportunities. And we know that the content that we need from an SEO perspective, so we've got the content for the real world people, we've got the content for SEO and Google that we absolutely need. So then we go away and evaluate what do we have at the moment, and invariably there will be gaps. So MintTwist will talk about a content gap analysis, and I think Robert and some of his team, you know, we've been having these conversations with some of their clients about where there's gaps in the content. And the great thing about the content gap analysis from a Fin partner's perspective is you come out with a list of tasks that are effectively, you know, titles of blogs in many cases, and types of pages and bits of content that are just missing from a client strategy, and they need them to engage their audience, and they need them to optimize for search. And so that process works particularly well if you're going to redesign and redevelop or even just refresh a website, because you can kind of put it all in one project, but it can also work as a standalone piece, just slightly off piece there, but hopefully that's relevant for some people. Okay. Here's an exercise for you to try at home. Just have a look at one of your clients' websites and just ask yourselves these questions, and you'll probably find that when you look at most websites, there's always some disconnects, and you know, it might be fuel for a conversation. Okay, I'll just talk a little bit about the process. So in terms of the design process, so we've spoken about website planning. Now I'm going to speak about website design, and we'll speak a bit about development, and then we'll talk about how the whole thing hangs together. So once we've done that planning process that we've just spoken about, what we're going to have really is a really strong website brief. So a client might come across with 3 or 4 page website brief, brilliant. What we've done is put that brief through our planning process. We've beefed it out now, so we know exactly what we want to say. We know who we want to say it to, and we know what we want them to do on the website, because the website is normally a step in a process, and so the website is then going to connect with the business process and the business strategy that obviously the wider organization is most concerned with. The website's just a tool to help them be more effective with their marketing communications, right? And so we've got this really clear brief, and we've got this content audit and gap analysis. So the designers can then create a sitemap, the wireframes and the designs that are going to allow us to deliver against that brief. And I'm pretty sure that most people on the call will be familiar with sitemap, but actually, there's probably a few that don't, and that's no issue. So what a sitemap is it's just a list of all of the main pages, and actually all of the pages in a website, and it talks about how they connect with each other. So the idea is that if you've got logical groups of pages, you logically group them together. This helps in 2 ways. It helps users of the website to navigate a website in a coherent way. And the easier we make it for our users, the more effective a website is going to be. But it also, as with many things in digital, it's also friendly to the Google search spider bot. So if Google can come down an area of our site and it finds a bunch of related content, it's able to index our website in a more effective way, which allows us to compete more effectively from an SEO perspective. The website, a sitemap rather, kind of implies a menu structure, and very often, our navigation menu structure on the website will look like a sitemap, but it's not necessarily a one-to-one. Once we've got a sitemap, and this is for MintTwist, this is the kind of process we like to, develop a sitemap, and we share it with the clients, and we ask them to sign off the sitemap. Once the sitemap has been signed off, then we will create wireframes, depending on the scope of the project, maybe for all of the pages, maybe normally for the most important types of pages. And these wireframes they're logical representations of the way that the information will be laid out on a page. So obviously they're not designs, it's the step before a design, and it's really there to make sure that we organize the information in the most effective way so that that page can do the job that it's supposed to do and provide the information that we want that page to provide for a user, but also crucially make it easier for them to take the next most relevant step. So there's a few things to note when you're designing websites. Most users, think about yourself. Users don't really read websites. It's very rare that you read every word on a page. Most users will scan a website, and hopefully you can see my mouse, and you'll scan in a Z formation. So users will start in the top left, and then they'll scan to the top right, and then they'll come down to the bottom left, and then they'll scan across to the bottom right. And so when designers are laying out a page, it's good to have that in your mind, because that's how you would organize the information. So, this is what I want you to look at first, second, third, fourth. The other thing that wireframes would typically articulate is what's called the fold line. So when you design websites with HTML compliant code, it doesn't really matter what the screen size is. In advance of the user playing with the aspect ratios, a web page will always render with the same fold line. So designers, MintTwist, all designers can design for where the fold line sits. And so the most important thing there is obviously all of the most important information we want above the fold. If there's a crucial step, if there's a button that sits below a fold, then the effectiveness of that web page will be enormously negatively impacted, because again, like most people don't read a web page, most people also don't scroll down to go, they're not going to go and searching for that button that you want them to press. If you don't make it easy for them, they'll move on. They might not understand the function of the page, which is, you know, terrible. And so it's really important that you design for where the fold is. So look, if you've got all of the information that very often sits at the bottom of most websites, you know, it will be the information that's you know, not as important. The key stuff needs to be above the fold. And then, you know, once a client has signed off wireframes, then you can start to put the design on the top. I think the key thing here is really taking the clients down on a road so that we mitigate the amount of toing and froing that has to happen. Website projects are notoriously difficult to complete cost effectively because of the toing and froing that happens. So over sort of many years, MintTwist has honed the process, and look, nobody's perfect, but we've got quite good at bringing the client on the journey, and actually the client likes it as well because they understand what they're getting at each step, and they buy into the process. Okay, so we've planned our website, we've designed our website. Now, what we're doing here inside a digital agency, inside MintTwist, we're taking it from the designers and we're handing over typically to the developers. And let's talk then. So we've, you know, about what the whole process looks like. So this is the planning and design phase that we spoke about. You know, we've got our designs, we've got our website architecture, and you know, so we planned and designed the thing, but now we need to go into build. And so I mentioned we've got sort of our front end coding. So the first step of building a website, typically, and we'll talk about different types of websites later on. But it would be taking those page designs and actually turning them into that HTML code that we saw before. So, you know, you have to be very skilled at what you're doing. And obviously there are tools that we use, but essentially you're trying to recreate a visual representation of what you want the website to look like by manipulating code like this. So that's the skill of a front-end developer. MintTwist, you know, really lucky. We've got some amazing front-end developers that work with us. And so they're building HTML and CSS. CSS stands for cascading style sheets. And these are the things that help to enforce consistency across pages in terms of style, which means you can set things like fonts and font size and colors and all that type of stuff. And then CMS stands for Content Management System. Most websites, and in fact, all websites that MintTwist build these days, even if it's a very simple website, you plug in the content management system and then it just creates more flexibility for managing the content. Even if the client has no interest in managing the content themselves, even if they want, you know, us to support their content, it still makes sense to build in a content management system. A content management system is, you know, right at the top of this. I spoke about the three-tiered architecture. It is essentially a database, and it needs some code to go and pull content out of a database and present it as part of the front end. But the content management systems are so well sort of developed, it's not a complicated thing for us to do. We've got building blocks and we can pick them up. It's just a question of making that content management system reflective of the bespoke and tailored design that we've created for the front end of the website. If there are some elements of content that needs to be fixed, so like hard-coded, then it's, you know, it's really important we get sign-off on those, because those are the things where it takes disproportionately large amounts of time to make changes. If someone wants to change some words and it's in a content management system, it's typically very easy to do that. And then we've got sort of the copywriting, and what MintTwist did, many years back was to completely separate the content with the design, the job of designing and building, and for a number of reasons, really. Firstly, it's in our view, and you might share this view, it's very often a job that the client will underestimate and potentially even undervalue, which is kind of disappointing but true. So what we typically say to the client is, look, you've got to manage this content bit. We will support you. If you need support, come to us. And typically at the outset of a project, the client will say, yeah, fine, we'll kind of, we'll deal with the content, no problem, we can do that. But then when you get into the day-to-day process, certainly of a web design and rebuild, the client very often finds that actually it's more work than they thought, and actually they're really busy, and actually it's really valuable, so I will have your support, please. And this is obviously something that you guys would be the specialists at creating. Okay, and then there's just the go live process, and a few things to say about go live. I'm guessing some of you out there might have sort of seen that you can launch websites with a big bang, or you can launch them softly. I'm absolutely sure that you could make a strong case for launching a website with a bang. But I suppose, just given with my pragmatic, boring technical hat on, it's the problem with launching a website with a bang is that it's almost normal for there to be some problems, particularly if it's a new website. So a go live quietly, at a quiet time and without shouting too much about it, is normally the advice we would normally give to a client, unless there's some exceptional reason for them not to do that. You can test a website in a sort of test environment, which obviously you do. You can do it as much as you want, but when you actually put a website on a live server and real world people start using it, there will probably be issues. And I suppose the other thing to say, what MintTwist, what we've done sort of from the outset, and we're not the only people, we're not the only agency to do this, but we typically said to a client, look, as part of the cost of designing and developing, everything that we do, the intellectual property becomes, your property. Once we put the website live, you pay the final invoice, it's yours. So there's that kind of like notional handover of the intellectual property at the point of go live. And from a kind of, I guess, from a commercial perspective, the way that sort of we've learned that works best for clients is that there's a commercial bit of, it's a commercial agreement that underpins the planning, the design, the project management, the build, potentially working with the clients on content. And once the client's ready to go live, that's the end. That's the end of that bit of project. And then you move into a retainer-based support service, because any other type of trying to do bits of support work as a fixed price typically won't work for a client. It will be too expensive for them, and it's too bitty, and there's too much toing and froing about chunks of money. So a support service, and it can potentially be very low cost, because once we've built, set up and optimized the website to support it, shouldn't cost that much money. And that can be reactive support and proactive support, reporting on the performance of the websites on a quarterly basis, what we do for virtually all of our clients. And that's it, and that's the whole process there. Right, let's talk a bit. Just see how far I am through this. Yeah, okay. So I'm going to go till about 11:30. So we'll go for about another 40 minutes, 45 minutes or so, and then obviously we've got time for any questions. Okay. So responsive design. So responsive design is when we create. Let me go back. So this is the MintTwist homepage. This is what it looks like to a human. This is what it looks like from an HTML, CSS perspective. Responsive design means as I shrink down the size of my window, the code itself responds to the shrinking window. So you saw that this menu collapsed into a mobile phone style menu, and the content reorganizes itself appropriately so that it's optimized for a smaller window. So responsive design means that the code responds to the size of the window that it's being rendered in. And it's quite intelligent, and it basically, this stuff has to reorganize itself, and there's coding in here to allow that to happen. So if a website designer or, if a website is not coded for that to happen, it won't automatically happen. What will happen is that it will scale down and everything will just get smaller version of itself. And what does that mean? On a mobile device, it basically means the website's closed, potentially at worst unusable, and at best a rubbish experience. And so what does that mean in real life? Well, in real life it just means that website won't be anywhere near as effective on a mobile device as it would be on a desktop device. So if you've got clients out there, and there are still many websites in the world, I don't know what the stat is, but it's a huge number, that aren't optimized, that aren't made to, that aren't designed to be responsive. Which is a fail in this day and age, because most companies worth their salt will have visitors to their website that are coming from mobile devices. Okay, that's responsive design, and then a separate thing is obviously mobile apps. So mobile app, we're coding for our mobile devices. The key things to say here are the thing about mobile apps. Let's see if we've got it on the next slide. Yeah, we've got it there. So the thing to say for this slide is, if you create an app for iPhone, that's the type of code. You have to create a different app for Android devices, because they're essentially different operating systems that work. And then, for the Microsoft based phones, then for the Nokia phones, then it's another one again. Okay, so what's the difference between mobile web means responsive. So it means we're looking at that website on a browser versus an app. So platform independent, this means, is it independent of the type of device, meaning iPhone or Android? So as we just said, an app, no, it's not independent. You need to do a separate app for iPhone and a separate app for Android. If it's a responsive website, whatever browser you use on your mobile phone will work. So if you use Chrome on your mobile phone, or Safari, or whatever you use, Internet Explorer, the website, the responsive website will render correctly so far as it's coded correctly for HTML, which we can assume it is. A richer experience can be developed on an app, because when you develop an app, remember the three-tiered architecture. We said that the development code when we're viewing a website in a browser, whether it's on our desktop or on our phone, there is no development code. It's just front-end code being rendered on our system. When we develop an app, what we're doing is putting code onto our phone. It's why you have to update an app. It's why you have to install it in the first place. But once you do that, and you're essentially giving it permission to use functionality in this phone, so suddenly it knows where we are in the world with the geolocation system. It can send us push messages. It can know which way I'm flipping it. It can access our photos and videos, and pretty much any function that's on our phones, we can develop an app to take advantage of those functions. You can't go as far as that with essentially a responsive website that's running on your phone, because it's not integrated into your phone in the same way. The really powerful thing about an app is, because people love their phones, an app sits on my phone, and as soon as I open my phone, I've seen some apps here, and I've got LinkedIn because I love LinkedIn, and I've got Twitter. So those are the brands that I care about. They're on my phone. I'm seeing them every day. So there's some good brand awareness that you can get if you can create an app that uses that your audience actually wants. You can update responsive websites and they will update immediately. If you update an app, you need your users to update through the App Store. I think the final thing I want to say about apps is if clients want an app, but the best way to think about it is think about some really specific functionality that that client can deliver for its audience. So obviously, if it's e-commerce, you know, we can just make a shopping experience really seamless. That's why ASOS, this is their responsive website. They will want people to download the app as opposed to sit on the responsive website, because the app has a richer experience. It's more functional. It's easier to buy, typically, off from a well-developed e-commerce app. So for e-commerce, you know, it's a no-brainer. You build a really effective shop. But if you're non-e-commerce, it's got to be some sort of functional advantage to using the app over the website, as opposed to just creating an app for an app's sake. I'm sure you knew that. Okay, website conversion rate. So when we talk about in marketing, in the world of marketing, like what is the value of a good website? Well, for us, for me, it's about how effective that website is at converting a potential customer into someone who actually does the thing that that website's set up for them to do. And so, just a quick sort of maths lesson. Let's just imagine we've got a B2B, you know, software technology client that has a website that has 10,000 visits per year from, like, let's just assume they're the right potential type of customers. And that website drives 200 leads per year. So, you know, 15 or so leads per month come through whatever lead capture tactic they're employing. So 200 as a percentage of 10,000 is 2%. So we can say that that conversion rate of that website is 2%, and that's converting from visitors to leads. Now, if a client wants to say, well, you know, leads is one thing, but I want to talk about sales, then you would need to say, you know, what is your sales team? So if we're a software technology company, we've got a sales team that's sitting there wanting leads to be, you know, handed to them every day, and they want the website to do that. So they come to the digital marketing agency. You know, this is what we're at. So we would then say, okay, so what is your conversion rate from leads to actual customers at the moment? And if it was 25%, that's great. 25% of 200 is 50 sales. And then you would kind of say to look, what's the average, just roughly, what is a customer worth to you, you know, over a year or whatever is meaningful for the client? Then you can say that if it was £20,000 for, you know, each of the software technology clients, average customer, 50 times 20,000, you know, is £1 million. So you can say that website's generating you £1 million. And in a way, just having that conversation, in our experience with clients, it's eye-opening for them how valuable or not potentially their website is. And then, so what you're saying really is that that's a benchmark. And then whatever you do on website, when you're refreshing or redesigning or rebuilding a website, what you're trying to do is obviously do better than that. And you want to do better subjectively, but this is kind of an objective way for those clients that like to buy, you know, hard facts and money. This is the way to do it, or one way to do it. So then you would say, okay, we need to improve the conversion rates. And the reason, Mrs. Client, we're taking you through this process of, you know, going over who's your audience, what do they feel, how do we want them to feel, all of that type of stuff, is so that we can improve the conversion rate. It's so that we can go from 2% to 3%, because of the 98% of potential customers that went to your website last year that actually didn't end up making an inquiry, didn't even make an inquiry, there will be a significant portion, likely there will be a significant portion of that audience that the only reason they didn't make an inquiry is because we didn't make it easy enough for them to do it, or our lead generation tactic wasn't enticing enough. And actually, by making some tweaks, we can just nudge a little bit that conversion rate. But, you know, as we'll see, that a small nudge from 2% to 3% can make a big difference. Because 3%, let's assume that we've got exactly the same number of visitors. There's no increase in visitors because we're just redesigning the website. We're not running any marketing, we're not bringing anyone else in at the moment. But if we redesign that website and we manage to go from 2 to 3%, 3% of 10,000 now means 300 leads. If the sales team converts at the same level, meaning 25% of 300, a quarter of 300 is 75 leads converted into sales. And so their website's then gone from £1 million of new business revenue to £1.5 million just because of a website project redesign process that might have cost, a very small